Takashi Mobile, that's a very good story, but it's a bit long. Actually, it was kind of just a fake name when we were doing anonymous network architectures for virtual operators, so doing mobile operators without an actual network, just brands like Virgin Mobile, for example. We did a virtual operator for a public broadcaster here called Veronica in 1999, but we didn't necessarily want to reveal the names, so we just sort of anonymized everything, and I used Kurosawa names for all the network elements. So somebody said, hey, you guys with the Takashi switch, why don't you? And we just became Takashi Mobile.
How is mobile changing people's lives at the moment, especially in developing countries?
Well, it's interesting because the knowledge that we've learned in developed countries, Western Europe, for example, or the United States, we're using to far greater impact in Africa and to a lesser extent in South America and Southern Asia. But there's no internet connectivity for people. There's not even electricity in most locations. So, yeah, it's very interesting to have some sort of internet-connected device for applications, real applications, not just content and watching broadcasts of things or SMS. So what I've been doing in Tanzania, for example, is using the phone for banking. So you can make transactions, you can see your bank balance for the first time ever. Even people that have bank accounts don't have legitimate access to banking services because they're not near a bank branch or not near an ATM in those locations. So the mobile is a tool to get control on your financial life for banks.
Is it putting organizations like Western Union out of business?
Well, the international remittance business is a little bit different because then you have corridors between developed countries and Africa. And still what you have to have in your African country is a place to get the cash. You need some sort of distributor, if you will. Western Union has those distributorships. There's a lot of potential for that. Companies like Vodafone, for example, have M-Pesa because they have Vodafone operations and they have also dealers selling vouchers and prepaid phones in those countries. So they have the network to get the cash. They want to try to put a big ding into Western Union. But actually, if you're a bank in Africa or in Europe, you have the capability to do SWIFT transactions, which was already going around Western Union in the first place. So unbanked people is the real trick. So if you have a product for mobile banking in Africa, you can get to unbanked people and you can provide a way for remittances. That's a huge, huge, huge gold ring. If somebody could put a big ding into Western Union, there's a lot of money to be made in doing that, and everybody's sort of running for that goal, I think.
And are they getting enough support from the phones? Because, I mean, in order to do this, you need to run applications. Are there phones out there that can run them?
Well, yeah. In Tanzania, for example, we just used USSD Phase 2, and that is available on like 95% of the phones there. So it doesn't.
What does that mean?
Well, USSD is a transmission network sort of akin to SMS to a certain extent. So it runs on very basic phones, and everybody is recharging their prepaid phones using the same kind of code. So it's like a *#123. That kind of interface, if people are using it in that country, is a fantastic way to do menu-driven banking. In some countries, they've chosen to do Java midlets, so then you need a Java phone or Java mid P2 phone. But you'd be surprised at how many cool phones are in developing countries. That's the first thing that a lot of people want to buy. So we found that, for example, in Tanzania, that about 40% of the phones were able to handle applications, but mobile internet access is not so ubiquitous. So we stuck with USSD and SMS for services.
And what are the biggest challenges to the network is, in fact, that you can have such an impact that there's no cash in the villages?
Well, that would be great. But certainly what you can do is you can eliminate the common practice, for example, of one person taking 25 debit cards to the city with 25 PIN numbers from all the people and then getting all the money for all the people in the village. You can just transfer the money directly. Cash is still kind of king, especially since there's no retail point of sale electronic payment mechanisms there. But for example, in Malawi, we're working on a retail banking mobile application, so you could use your mobile phone at a retailer or a restaurant, for example, to pay for things, instead of actually having to implement a swipe and chip and pin kind of system in these countries. But we can leapfrog over that, and depending on the bank, if you're a bank that has a lot of merchants, maybe you'd be interested in trying to push that. If you're a consumer bank, you just want to do P2P and bill payments and things like that.
Why don't people have bank accounts? Is it simply because they don't have a legal address?
Well, it's cultural as well. It's also a total amount of cash. And also, it's a historical issue because only the government and the army and other places in these countries have ever paid paychecks into bank accounts. So there's something stunning in most of sub-Saharan Africa in terms of the number of people that actually carry all the money on them at all times. Something like 45% of the people in some countries are carrying all the money they have in their life, all the money they've ever earned on them at that moment. So when you get paid by whoever your employer is, you take all the money out immediately and then just use it for the month, and then the same thing happens every single month. If you can provide easy financial services, more information about how much money you have and when you've been paid, maybe you'd be interested in saving 10% of it or 5% of it or putting it a little bit away, not just taking it and putting it under your mattress every month. So that's the idea, and that's also why the FMO and the European Commission, the World Bank, IFC, are interested in modern banking tools, because maybe it would facilitate modern banking behavior, saving a little bit of money for the future.
Is it also culturally linked too? I mean, I believe that some Islamic banks aren't allowed to make a profit, or have I misunderstood?
Yeah, it's true. There are some cultural issues, but actually when it comes down to business, I don't think that those cultural issues really are that important. In Swahili, Africa, the coast, most of the banks are actually British anyway, like Barclays, things like that, because of the colonial history there. So I think that there's cultural issues, but it's more about your personal cultural issue. So for example, in Kenya, there's 42 major tribes. The Kikuyu might not necessarily be interested in banking with a non-tribal kind of bank or known other kind of tribes. So those cultural issues are different country by country. But in general, I think that it's more behavior than it is cultural, historical. It's just more people that get the money, take the money. They don't trust the government. They don't trust taxes. They just want their cash immediately.
One of the big challenges in Africa is you have all these different languages. Do you see any possible partnerships between, let's say, the mobile phone industry and the media that's there, either radio or television?
I do, but I do think it's a little bit drawn along colonial lines to a certain extent. So you have British broadcasting and East Africa. You have West Africa and also Southern Africa and French broadcasting. I think that to a certain extent, you really need to be able to communicate in the first language of every single country. And then second language turns out to be the colonial language. So a lot of our material in East Africa is in English secondarily, but if you want people to use it, you need to be able to get that information into people's hands, and also people that can't read as well. And that's where I think that broadcasting would be very, very, very interested in really making it tangible to what you can do with this, with these functionalities. And simple. It's got to be very simple. Because if it's too many steps, nobody's going to care, no matter what language it is, because it's just too complicated to do.
Coming back to Europe, what's happened to the mobile banking sector in Europe? Has it gone away? Is it thinking about what it's going to do next, or is it waiting for more intelligent interfaces?
I think to a certain extent it's been a casualty of the success of internet banking. Every bank, or every legitimate bank, has had mobile banking or has tried it or does have it now. The Rabobank, which I work for, and also ABN AMRO and ING, they've always had mobile banking available, either WAP-based or Java Midlet-based. But broadband connectivity is ubiquitous, and you got a whole entire customer cockpit where you can manage your accounts, transfer money really simply. It's much more secure because you have secure tokens that work via HTTPS. So because mobile banking came at the same time or later than internet banking, and it's much more convenient to do internet banking, I think that mobile banking in Western Europe at least has become a kind of a geeky tool, a way to check your balance, or somebody that's really into mobile banking will do it, but it's a small percentage of people. So I would never want to pay all my utilities on the bus on my mobile phone if I could just do it at home, relaxed, with the bills in front of me and things like that. So it's just a question of leapfrogging. So in Africa, where they don't have internet connectivity, this is their internet connectivity. But if you have a full broadband experience, you're not going to step back to mobile, especially since most European banks are really pushing to virtual channels. So your internet banking environment is your banker. Most people have the primary interface through the internet to their bank, and the mobile is a poor substitute for that, whatever transmission or application you're using.
Is the role of banking changing in the sense that rather than being a place which stores your cash, more of a coach by saying, well, that's where you can actually use the fact that now you know your balance, and maybe if you've taken a loan, I put it this way, I could see a scheme where I'd taken a loan from a bank, and if I was paying it back on time, and my coach was, my bank was helping me, saying, look, if you carry on like this, it's okay. that I might be rewarded in the form of getting credit on my phone.
Yeah. Well, a good example, and I don't mean to speak only about it, but is in the Netherlands, a good example, the Rabobank and also ING and ABN AMRO to a certain extent have moved towards a virtual channel strategy. So if you want to do basic bank business, you can do it on electronic channels. It's far more cost effective. And what they do is they keep physical locations open for advice. That's really what's going on. So if you want advice on a mortgage or proactive advice coming from your local bank, you'll get it, you go and talk to them, it's great. Most banks, most Rabobanks don't even have cash. They don't even have cash in them anymore. If you want money, you have to order it up front and go pick it up at a certain time.
And pay for it.
And pay for it. And essentially what they're doing is they're taking a special card out and going into the ATM and taking the money out for you. So it is not about cash anymore, it's about advice, it's about long-term life cycle management for you. I want a new mortgage, or I want to plan for my retirement. So what the Rabobank has done is taken its cost savings in having virtual channels and put it into proactive kind of people-to-people, face-to-face stuff. Some banks have gone completely virtual, but what the reality is, and I think part of the conference that we're here now, is that the amount of contacts, client contacts that the Rabobank has had with virtual channels is unbelievably, I mean, it's infinitely more than they ever had in physical locations, because you have to wait in a queue, you have to actually make an appointment. So they can have less meaningful contacts, but more meaningful meetings, and have far more contact with the bank, far more information, far more emails, and far more times to get information about their financial situation via the web.
So finally, what's your preferred future for this? I mean, how would you like to see this develop, bearing in mind your experience both in Europe and in Africa, let's say in the coming 3 to 5 years?
In Europe or in Africa? In Africa, I think there's a huge amount of benefit from just simple modern banking tools. If you can eliminate cash, you can eliminate all sorts of other side problems like fraud and graft and other things that have been plaguing a legitimate business investment in Africa for a very long time. So if you can stabilize the economic situation, you stabilize the economic situation of the government at the same time, you have far more investment in those regions, you have actually a trustable and noteworthy economies to invest in. So I think that's fantastic. And it's half building the infrastructure and half building the whole entire perception that it is interesting to have modern banking. It's not just the man coming down and telling you this is how it's going to work. So over the next 4 or 5 years, and you see it now happening like wildfire in these countries, if there can be sort of a bit of a shakeout from everybody and their mother trying to make a payment system and kill Western Union to a couple tried and trusted methodologies and some really serious opinions about mobile banking, because I think that's really what you need. You need multiple people, multiple brands, operators, and banks, all to say the mobile is a device you can use. Then they have completely leapfrogged the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the entire credit card regime that we have in Western Europe and North America, and they've gotten to modern banking with their own tools and in a far more cost-effective way. I think that would really be my dream, that they get where they want to go, where they need to go, without having to go through all the crap that we went through in Western Europe.
You mentioned fraud. Is that a problem with the SIM cards, things like that? Do people break in, or do they copy things?
Well, no. I mean, well, the SIM card, there's the Chaos Club in Germany trying to crack the GSM encryption right now. But in general, if you have a GSM phone, you have the same kind of protection you have against cloning phones and cloning identities with the GSM phone, which is pretty high. The major problem of fraud, and it is also that way in Europe as well, is family fraud or known fraud. So you have people like your son or daughter that know your ATM number, they have your PIN card on the table at some point, and something happens. So the fact that you have people in your village that have used your ATM card, all that kind of stuff is the major fraud problem. Retail is another story. We have retail fraud, €1 for you, €1 for me, different locations. If you have electronic money, it makes that much safer as well. But I don't think the mobile phone has brought more fraud potential. It's just a new kind of channel, and a new kind of channel requires a new analysis of its security, its holes, and what you can do with it. So we limit what you can do with the mobile phone. It's not completely limited, but it's a little bit limited. You can't just pay unknown people or people in different banks. If you want to do something, you have to, for example, add them to your address book of known people that you're paying to if they're already not known in the system. So there's limitations on transaction amounts and stuff like that, just to keep it from going crazy. The same as we have with debit cards and credit cards in Europe, you know.
How do you tell a community about mobile banking when they've never seen it before? I mean, what methods do you use?
Well, in Tanzania, I'll give you that example. We did some above-the-line advertising, so television commercials, but we also made DVDs of exactly how you can use it. We sent them to all the branches, and you also had to send a television and a DVD player to all the branches, and there's like 1,000 branches, so it's a very widely spread kind of environment. What they did was they also set up these DVD players and televisions in the halls, so then people were queuing to just sit in front of the banker. They could learn about mobile banking and forms there to sign up, etc. And we did some promo teams as well, some students and younger people that could go out to different population centers and cities. You couldn't go to every single really village, but they go teach people about it, teach them how to use it, see how safe it is, use their own phones. In Tanzania, we also have mobile ATMs, and ATMs that actually drive on trucks between all the towns, so then you know the ATM is going to be at your city or your village once a week, and the teams go with those people to also show them that you use mobile banking. It's got to be hands-on, and you need to talk face-to-face to somebody normally, because then they'll trust the process.
Finally, have you thought about using theatre groups, actually putting into plays?
Could be. I mean, we've done some interesting things in Tanzania. So we had television commercials. We also hired the most popular band to do ringtones, also for mobile phones, and also do the jingle. So try to get a little bit more cultural identity and trust with the bank to say, hey, listen, this is something you can do. People start humming it. It's on the television. I think theater is a small step away from that. But we certainly use music and television to reinforce the message.